All right, seeing some nods. Good morning. It is December 18th. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. Co-Chair Savas and Sherman. The meeting is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, and I'll introduce my co-chair, Brett Sherman, and allow him to run the meeting this morning, if you'd like.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Commissioner Savas. It is very good to see all of you this morning. I see all familiar faces, so we won't bother to go around the room with introductions, but it is very nice to spend this last couple of weeks of the year with each and every one of you at 7:30 in the morning. So greetings to you all. We will get right into the agenda. I know that our first item has been bumped out a little bit, so if my brain works well, we'll be jumping into our second agenda item. So if we've got, I see both Ted and Grace are here and available, so we'll get right into an RFFA discussion. So please take it away.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, members of C4. And again, thank you for having me today. I'm about to share my screen, so I'm hoping that I could successfully do this so you are able to see my presentation. I'm hoping folks are currently seeing a PowerPoint slideshow.
Looks great.
All right. And I think, are you still seeing a PowerPoint slideshow? I sometimes have display setting issues.
Still seeing it, so thank you.
Perfect. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me again this morning. I'll be giving a kind of an entire update on the 2028 through 2030 regional flexible fund process. The majority of my presentation today will focus on step 1A, which is the development of the new project bond, but I did want to give a couple of brief updates on the step 2 process, which is our competitive process to local projects. So again, just noting, I'll be kind of going through 4 major items. 3 of them are related to the bond. In particular, with the bond, we'll be walking through the technical evaluation results, then going through next steps, and then finally, connected to that next steps process, actually kick off a discussion to gather your input today in regards to the development of bond scenarios. So just moving into that, let's go ahead and launch in step 2. So on Friday, November 22nd, the application period closed for the 28 through 30 Regional Flexible Fund Step 2 allocation. In total, Metro received 24 applications requesting about $139 million in regional flexible funds. In general, the requested amount is about 2 to 3 times of the amount of funding available of flexible funds in this cycle. That's fairly consistent with what we've seen in previous cycles in terms of relative request to funding available. This cycle's applications also reflect the first time that Metro is able to make available application assistance to local jurisdictions. And we had 5 local jurisdictions in the Clackamas County part of the region take advantage of that new resource. And we really believe from the anecdotal things we heard directly from the staff working on those applications, it was a positive experience for those who received that assistance. So just then zooming in here a little further, and I apologize, it's not the easiest thing to see, but this material was included as part of the JPAC packet this morning. You can see that there were 6 applications that came from the Clackamas County subregion. They were requesting in total, those 6 applications requested about $35.5 million in regional flexible funds. So with this list essentially of 24 and those 6 included out of the county, what's next is essentially that we'll begin to move forward into the technical evaluation process with the aim to share those results from the analysis come later this spring prior to our public comment. And I'll be able to speak a little bit to the step 2 as well as the step 1 schedule kind of all together when I talk about those next steps. But just wanted to give a pause and just note that, we have 6 great applications that came out of this part of the region. And again, just noting that 5 of those applications were the beneficiaries of that application assistance. All right, so now moving forward into the bigger update on the development of the new project bond as part of this REFA cycle. First, I just wanted to begin the presentation with some brief context and remind ourselves how and why we got here. First, as part of the adoption of the Flexible Fund Program Direction for the 28 through 2030 cycle back in July, This document essentially outlined the region's intent on how the region wants to expend regional flexible funds in a manner that's going to advance our regional policy objectives. As part of that action, the region agreed to move forward with developing a new project bond proposal for regional consideration. Essentially, this is really the direction that staff has received in terms of bringing forward a proposal that the region's decision makers will make a decision as to whether to move forward with and pursue. We've been essentially calling this step 1A.1, this development proposal item. The development of the new project bond proposal is under the direction of the bond purpose and principles that were adopted as part of the program direction from July. The purpose and principles outline some key objectives, including a focus on regional or corridor scale transit projects, comprehensively advancing the regional transportation plan goals, leveraging significant discretionary funding, and is a reasonable trade-off between the advantages of funding priority projects earlier than otherwise possible, with the reduction of our purchasing power later down the line, because this is in recognition that if we do proceed as a region to move forward with this bond, we are encumbered to debt service that will be taken from future cycles of step 2. So these are some of the core directives that came out of that process. And so we're really, as Metro staff is working towards the development of that new project bond, we're really trying to adhere and maintain those key objectives. In addition to the bond purpose and principles, we do actually have some broader regional flexible fund objectives to maintain as well. That includes that we want to remain consistent with our strategic regional funding approach as we consider what this bond package proposal ends up looking like that we bring forward for regional decision makers, and that essentially that this bond proposal is a reflection that we're investing regional flexible funds across the region, but without a particular commitment of funding levels to any one part, since we are unable to suballocate. Next, I'm going to move forward into the next slide. Also, as the JPAC materials noted, the technical information that I'll begin to present today, and then further, as we start a discussion around input in the development of the bond scenarios, I just want to really, again, highlight and note that these are a small number of many different factors that will actually play into the development of that preferred bond proposal that we'll be requesting that regional decision makers take action on. As you can see from this diagram, those inputs really span across multiple factors, from like the technical quantitative side to the qualitative side, where we're looking and seeking both partner input as well as public input. And then we have different regulatory or mechanism considerations as we still are working through the actual selection of the bonding mechanism that we'll be looking at, and what potential administrative requirements or restrictions that may come about from that. And then lastly, again, we want to maintain and adhere to our policy direction. So with that, I'll begin walking through the technical evaluation results. Just a brief review of the technical evaluation. The evaluation of the 9 individual candidate projects comprised of 3 different components. There was a qualitative, under the performance section, we had kind of two pieces. There was a qualitative analysis of the project narrative to understand how well the project is consistent and aligns with the bond purpose and principles outlined in our program direction. Then there was, following with the RTP outcomes advancement, there was a combined quantitative, kind of in the form of a geospatial analysis, as well as qualitative analysis based off of the narratives that were provided as part of the applications, to understand how well those candidate projects advance the implementation of our RTP goals. Following that, there was a third evaluation that was undertaken through an outside consultant team that we brought on. And essentially it was to look at the excuse me, the project scope, schedule, and budget to really understand what are the core delivery challenges around these projects, and just flagging those different potential delivery challenges that may emerge as these projects continue to develop. So further kind of getting into those specific, those 3 different evaluations, this slide shows an overview of the actual performance measures used for each of those evaluations undertaken. Again, the performance evaluation, which consisted of both that bond purpose and principle consistency analysis, as well as that RTP goal advancement analysis. The methodology applied in the performance analysis weighed each measure equally, where each measure could receive a total of 5 points. Again, as noted, the measures featured both a quantitative analysis element, mostly in the form of doing some geospatial analysis, as well as the qualitative assessment based on the review of those narratives. More specifically, as it relates to the RTP goal advancement, those measures all really kind of tailored themselves and focused in looking at the candidate, how the candidate projects, those measures focused in and tailored themselves around essentially around their relationship to transit, given that our program direction was to be bring this forward as a transit focused bond proposal. So that's just kind of I could see where there's an aspect where you might look at that might be looked at or evaluated slightly differently if you were thinking about this in a broader context of a transportation project, but these were more explicitly brought into that transit lens. And then again, lastly, the project delivery assessment looked at 6 different categories, or excuse me, 5 major categories and a certain subset of projects, particularly for the larger capital infrastructure, larger transit capital projects, and kind of organized their the analysis around what delivery challenges might be, delivery challenges were kind of identified by those 5 different phases.
Hey, Grace, quick question for you on that slide before you move on.
Sure.
I think you had mentioned that under the bond purpose and principles, those are equally weighted. So you're kind of looking at creating a quantitative weighting for some of the things that can be both either quantitative or qualitative as you rank them. Under RTP goal advancement and project delivery, are those also equal weighted, or do they have a different numeric factor than like the bond purpose and principles? How does it all kind of come together?
Yeah, so in the RTP goal advancement, again, everything was equally weighted, and there was a 5-point scale. Essentially, pretty much in the RTP goal advancement, what we had was that for every measure, you had a quantitative component, and then you had a qualitative component, bringing your total up to 5. With the bond purpose and principles, yes, it was this total. We were kind of the evaluation was bringing it to a scale of 5, but it was based off of more of a qualitative analysis of what we were reading through the application narratives.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So here we have a map showing the 9 candidate projects. I just want to briefly note that as part of the JPAC materials that were submitted, as well as I believe submitted as a supplemental to C4 today, there was a set of 1-page summaries that were provided as part of the packet to be able to get acquainted with just the quick brush of the scope of all 9 projects. If there's a desire, I'm happy to run through those here right now just to have everyone oriented, but if folks feel fairly comfortable, I can move forward. Commissioner, sorry.
Yep, Commissioner Savas, please.
Yeah, Grace, thank you. Great to see you again this morning. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the presentation. I did not expect to see, I'm a little confused. I did not expect to see the Sunrise project, I guess, being evaluated under the 1A-1, it seems to me that if there was a category of 1A2 or B, or yeah, a 1B, yeah. So you have two different categories, and it seems to me, if I'm seeing this correctly, and of what I've learned, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that why would we evaluate a non-high capacity project when they were specifically a category for non-highway, but we use the criteria to grade the project? It's listed here, and it doesn't seem that it would fit there unless you have criteria specifically for the added category that we requested.
Yeah, so maybe that's jumping ahead to my next set of slides. The step 1A is just referencing all the candidate projects that are in consideration for the bond at this point in time, and that actually spans across the three different categories in which projects could have nominated or been nominated under. And so if it's okay for me to move forward, I think I might be able to answer your question, Commissioner Savas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So these are actually the technical evaluation results according by individual project, according to the individual measures, and across the nominating category. So what you can see that there is to the farther left, there's a grouping of the candidate projects that applied under the larger transit capital or capital investment grant category. In the middle are the projects that nominated under the first, last mile, and safe access to transit. And then the third is the projects nominated under the transit vehicle priority. I do want to just briefly note we have one crossover project in that it applied in two categories combined because it included elements of both. And then I also do want to note that in a select case, one of the measures was not applied for two of the candidate projects that were nominated because their project scopes were primarily limited to project development activities. So it was not kind of looked at under that context since it was looking at projects seeking funds through construction. But what I want to note briefly here as it relates to the technical evaluation results is that to kind of gauge, and I apologize, I didn't realize that what I put in there, the key got covered. But essentially what you're seeing is that what you have is that the darker shades of blue tend to show a higher kind of performing with like a higher rating relative to the lighter shades of blue tend to show like maybe a little bit lesser in terms of the performance and rating by that individual measure. In particular, we didn't want to bring forward actual individual scores because what we just wanted to note is that the technical evaluation is not intended to actually rank projects from 1 through 9. The notion is really to be able to understand kind of relative performance based by the individual measure itself. And so I'll be able to get to some overall findings. What I do kind of want to note as just like a couple of key things in this slide here is that, you know, there was no one project that say didn't outside of noting that we had a couple, like a specific measure that we didn't score for a couple of projects, but there's no project here that say had no shading of blue. And that ultimately what we really did see is that the projects were all kind of performing and working to advance those different measures in the performance evaluation. They're all kind of working towards, and we can see that being reflected. In particular, and actually this might be a slightly better slide to be able to see this, is that as you actually started bringing together projects that are kind of more like for like in the sense that they reflect their like intent and scopes are primarily focused around kind of one kind of centered topic. So in this case, that first, last mile and access to transit. The 4 candidate projects across the board that were in this category tended to actually perform fairly similarly in terms of their general where their scores and ratings ended up applying themselves. So that was just something that we found to be, as we started bringing these, started looking at these across their individual categories, it kind of started to show it's like, these are all projects that are looking to advance our regional objectives, and they bring different degrees of how they vary slightly in the context of how they meet our bond purpose and principles, just in a lot of, for a lot of factors of just being in different stages of project development. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of the thing that I wanted to note here. And I just also wanted to note that there are 2 projects out of the Clackamas County subregion that are in contention, that applied under this category. And so you're able to essentially see the overall scores for both. So I think I might have started to actually jump into what the actual overall findings are, as I was talking about those last 2 slides. But if we had to try to distill them very, very succinctly into kind of 3 main points, the first is, again, when it comes to that bond purpose and principles consistency analysis, we saw a lot of variety amongst the different 9 candidate projects in terms of how well they're actually performing and kind of meeting that consistency. Again, a lot of that is just a acknowledgement around that projects are coming in at different stages of project development. They have different funding strategies that they're approaching, and they're coming in with kind of different thoughts around their funding leverageability. And so those factors kind of you could see that essentially playing out across the different projects. Probably, I think one of the big positive things that come out of that is that we saw that overall, when we looked at RTP goal advancement, all the projects perform really well, and we could feel pretty confident in the sense that these projects, whatever set of projects that we're selecting to move forward as part of a bond proposal would actually be moving us towards that long-term vision. And then lastly, just to note with our project delivery analysis is that, no one project necessarily came out as like perfect in the sense of like they've identified and dealt with every single one of the potential project delivery challenges that they're coming to face. In each case, at least one project delivery challenge had been identified. But the positive side of that is that based off of the responses that were heard from our consultant actually having follow-up conversations and with the actual applicants and seeing their supplemental materials that were received, that really the nominating agencies were very aware of these different challenges and were actively working towards trying to address those different challenges. So I apologize because there's 2 more sections of this presentation to run through, and I'm trying to be quick. Next steps in this process, I just want to briefly note that where we are, because we have 2 kind of aspects of the Regional Flexible Fund process moving forward at the same time. The top line that you're seeing is the reflection of our Step 1A bond development process. And then the bottom line there is our Step 2 process. What you're essentially seeing is that we're slightly staggered in terms of our bond development process kind of just passed one of its major phases of work, in that we've just completed that candidate project evaluation as well as the project delivery assessment. And we're now starting to actually move forward into a process around the bond scenario development and being able to develop some technical information through the financial analysis of those different scenarios. With Step 2, we've just kind of completed that nomination or that call for projects. So we're now just starting to move into that technical evaluation. But just noting that these 2 tracks of work are still actually intended to come together come March 2025, where we do plan to open a public comment towards the end of March. So next steps as it relates specifically for the bond. This month, what TPAC and JPAC tomorrow morning will be hearing is a presentation of these candidate project evaluation, candidate project evaluation. And this work essentially has been taking place since the end of October, which I do want to just note again, with how far along we've made it in our process in such a quick time frame has been very impressive, and we should give ourselves a little kudos for that. We'll then also transition again into that scenario building process this month and begin that by taking your input on how staff should start looking at building those different bond scenarios for further analysis. Then over the course of January and February, we plan to bring forward the bond scenario assessments and bring forward that information, really starting to look at what are the potential trade-offs for the moving with each individual bond scenario as we're starting to then place that into the context of our step 2 process. We hope to have a set of draft scenario assessments in January, and then a revised scenario assessment come February. And in both cases, we'll be taking input. I should note about that. And then come March of next year, we'll then actually seek to receive to request action to then move forward into the public comment with the bond scenarios. So we'll be requesting that. Oops, I think I might have mistyped that. The recommendation to, oh yeah, no, that's correct. We'll be asking for TPAC's recommendation to JPAC in early March, and we'll request JPAC approval at their March meeting, and then we'll be opening public comment. So that brings us to the discussion item, and this should be hopefully very brief, so we can open it up for questions, comments on all the content that has gone through today. But just briefly, I wanted to just set the context as we're now moving into that next phase where we're looking to develop bond scenarios. Part of this conversation today is really about, it seems like to be able to help set that conversation, we should helpful to understand the content of what this bond scenario assessment is essentially going to contain. Essentially, what we're going to be doing in this next phase, once we actually have some different scenarios or packages that we're looking at, is we're looking at understanding what is the need in terms of the schedule of bond proceeds are available, or needs around the schedule of proceeds being available to be able to actually support the implementation of the individual projects. So that'll kind of vary according to the individual project schedules. It'll give us a clearer picture of understanding what the length of our debt repayment needs to look like in order to actually sustain being able to draw down that much funding. It'll also then give us a clearer picture of what our annual obligation around our debt servicing will be. So like how much further, in addition to the existing debt service that we have, how much we'll be adding to that on an annual basis, gives us a clearer picture of what we can actually sustain as an overall bond size. And then really kind of that weighty conversation around the trade-offs, knowing that this has implications for both the current step 2 process that we are actively in, as well as future cycles of step 2, knowing based off of how long that debt service will need to last, as well as how much that debt service will be. For today's bond concepts input discussion, just a couple of kind of notes to be able to help, again, set that framing or help frame that is that we're really wanting to focus on gathering input around concepts and themes at this point, and not focus on individual projects. I know that there's probably a lot of desire to be able to advocate for projects at this time, but we want to really try to bring this up a level and really think and talk about like what are the most important themes that a bond package should reflect. And then also as starting points to help further lay some context or around these bond scenarios, Metro will provide some reference scenarios to be able to kind of give us understanding of, like, in a sense, like bookends, like what would happen if we didn't bond, as well as what would happen, say, if you tried to bond for all 9 projects that are on this list. So that's something we want to be able to provide. We are trying to limit the number of bond scenarios to about a handful. So we're aiming for about 5. We know that with 9 projects, in the mix. We could have multiple permeations of that, but again, we're really trying to focus in and get us to kind of a small subset that we would take through that detailed analysis work. And then lastly, we just want to make sure that regardless of which bonds, with every bond scenario package that's being put together, it needs to be able to meet our program direction objectives. So we heard some input and feedback at TPAC last week on Friday, or 2 weeks ago, a little over a week and a half ago. And some of the themes that we heard at TPAC kind of entailed the following bullet points. That's just as an example set of starters. But really the core questions I have for C4 today is centered around, what are those themes that we should be building those bond scenarios around? And then, kind of a follow on, are there any of the themes identified by TPAC which resonate? And then are there any preferred theme combinations we should be considering? Just knowing that sometimes we might be able to machinate a couple of core ideas and have it all reflected in one scenario. And with that, I will go ahead and end my slideshow.
Very good. Commissioner Savas, you are right on top.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Grace, again. I'm not sure that my earlier question has been kind of addressed. And I, being on this journey since for almost a year now with RFFA opportunity here for bonding, my belief is the themes were twofold. One, I understand that the traditional means of dedicating the RFFA bonding to transit, high capacity transit, but that's the way we've always done it. Almost always, not quite, but that we were going to open up a new door for essentially project development for themes that don't fit into that high capacity transit development as typical. So, but yet, it does not seem as though that's really been conveyed, or the criteria has actually looked at that category separately opposed to the traditional. So I saw your dates were to be finalized essentially tomorrow, and it gives me pause a little bit here that we have not given a matter such as the Sunrise Project. Understanding I heard themes and so on, I get that, but how do you get a project in a major corridor that we're trying to develop for multimodal? How do we get that to move when it seems like every opportunity or funding opportunity, the criteria basically disqualifies us before it's out of the gate? It does not seem to be a level playing field, and that's why we had the carve out specifically for, I think what you're in your earlier slide was 1B, and that being, again, maybe I'm wrong here as far as whether it's 1B or 1A or however it's done, but this was specifically the discussion, and it gives me also pause when I hear, and again, I'm not picking on you, Grace, at all, you personally at all. But I'm concerned that the criteria or how these things were evaluated was really not discussed or proposed to the JPAC group for final approval, to make sure that it lined up conceptually with what we had envisioned and discussed. So that's my concern. I just look at the two projects. So you have for example, you have the Burnside project, in that one slide right alongside the Sunrise project. Well, the Burnside project, it has multimodal aspects today. Okay, you got transit, you got bike, ped, you have all those opportunities. They may not be seismically fit. And then you have the Sunrise project, which is woefully behind, which we're trying to get there and then some, has a lot of low income areas in there, a substantial amount of low income neighborhoods, and yet we can't ever seem to move the ball. We can't so it's almost self-fulfilling in the sense that if you ain't got anything, you're never going to get anything. If you got something already, you're going to get an improvement. And I I'm just, it's frustrating. So I'll be expressing that tomorrow.
I guess there's Commissioner Savas, there's a lot of input and feedback there, and I don't know if I'll be able to address every item, but a couple of items I can address in the context of just again noting that the technical evaluation, it is one of many inputs that is being provided as part of the development of the bond process, and I want to just note that as part of this, that there's kind of many different factors that will be weighing across from it, and that the technical analysis is not necessarily the driving decision force in this bond development process. So I just, that's to reemphasize, and it's part of that cross slide that essentially was laying out there, is that we're asking this bond to try to do a lot of different things, and so we're trying to apply a lot of different take a lot of different pieces of information to be able to help bring that forward for decision makers to be able to make that decision. Further, just as it relates to the technical analysis, I do want to note that the performance measures were brought forward through TPAC for discussion, and kind of brought forward to be able to, like, go through in detail. I unfortunately was out on leave at that time, because so I can't speak specifically as to what might have been discussed at this time, but I want to reflect that input and feedback that was probably given at the time was translated into the measures essentially that were and the criteria used to actually, like, analyze those individual performance measures were taken into account. And I mean, I guess with every evaluation, we go through this with our step 2 process too, especially as we've kind of evolved the step 2 process to be kind of modal agnostic, and really understanding, like, we want good projects that help us advance our RTP outcomes. I'd say that's somewhat of a similar approach that was applied in this step 1 process. It did actually have a focus on transit, so I do want to acknowledge we had a little more direction in that regard, but we had quite a variety of projects that we were looking at, and what I think you could really see kind of coming out of this technical analysis is that really, one of the core things that we want to have confirmed was confirmed, that, whatever slate of projects that does move forward as part of a bond package proposal, if the region elects to actually move forward with one, is that we know that'll help support advancing our RTP goals. And that's kind of the North Star that we're going for. Some of the other aspects and details around the project delivery challenges, that's like really good information for us to understand, because ultimately we want to make sure that if we are making a pretty significant decision around trading off future flexible funds to be able to advance forward, we want to be able to make sure that any sort of challenges in that implementation delivery for the project receiving those advanced funds can be mitigated for and addressed. And then lastly, again, this program direction, the bond purpose and principles is direction that we received through the adopted program direction, which the region did take action on back in summer of this year. So we're really just trying to adhere to that, essentially those kind of principles and objectives that were laid out to us for being able to do that assessment. So I want to recognize your points being made. I hope that in maybe placing some ground setting and just giving some further context about the technical evaluation, that may be able to help respond and provide some context.
Well, I appreciate that long explanation, and you don't need to respond to this, but I'll just say that along the way, including what you just said about what was approved in the summertime, we expressed concerns about how this was shaping up all along. And Clackamas County expressed that it was inconsistent with the direction that was given, high-level direction that was given earlier on in the year, almost a year ago. And apparently that is not translating into a pathway. If there's a pathway that gets to trying to develop projects to be consistent with the RTP and all these goals, show us that pathway, right? Build us a pathway to get there. But I think it's been, in my observation, just years and years and years of just being disqualified via interpretation and not opportunity to develop and bring our projects or our county into the 21st century with development. We are so transit deficient, and yet we can't get a pathway to get to where to get where everyone else is, which is robust. There's robust transit and multimodal options in the Portland area, right? And then we're building on that, and we're making that even more robust, and yet we're leading out the folks and the areas and the projects and the communities, and it's the people we're trying to serve. We have 170,000 people in Clackamas County that don't have access to transit. So is that being factored here? Apparently not.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Appreciate the comments. We'll move over to Mayor Milch. You're on.
Grace, thank you for your presentation. At the end there, you were talking about discussion based on central themes rather than so much individual projects. Those of us from jurisdictions that have submitted requests can think in terms of the projects, the design issues, the construction issues, and so on. Could you give us some examples of these kinds of central themes, though we may not usually think in those terms, but what are a few examples of the kinds of themes that you think will help guide a decision? Not necessarily ones that you advocate, but just so that we can think thematically.
Sure. And actually, I might just lean back on, if it's okay for me to share again, I might lean back on the input and themes. I'm hoping folks are able to see this. From this slide is what we heard from TPAC in terms of how to develop some bond scenario packages. Some kind of key core messages we heard was, ensuring that whatever our bond proposal or package is adhering to our program directions. So ensuring that the bond purpose and principles are being maintained, as well as possibly emphasizing some core RTP outcomes. So potentially looking at a bond package that looks to emphasize, I believe one member had stated the goals around safety, climate, and equity because it's consistent with some of their own planning, their own agencies' planning work. We also heard a key theme from partners as well around having a diversified bond scenario, diversified transit investment or diversified infrastructure, in the sense that a bond scenario package should be able to reflect across all three nominating categories that we had available to ensure that we see a mix of different types of transit investments, again, acknowledging and recognizing different transit needs across the region. So that could be transit vehicle priority, first last mile, as well as a large scale transit infrastructure. We also heard a theme centered around achieving land use goals. So that one I think is maybe still a little unformulated in our minds as to how that might look, as well as, oh, I must have literally just missed writing something, reflecting regional consensus was another theme that we heard around. So these are just high level examples, again, that came out of TPAC that might help start the thinking.
Very good. Thank you for the feedback. Councilor Lewis, you are next up.
Sure, thanks so much. I think the piece that might be a little bit of a broader context is not only looking at the projects, but also thinking about the size of the bonding package overall. And I think that the way that I see bonding best serving the region is bonding for big projects that has the opportunity to get match, or because we have money on the ground here through RUFA, draw down federal support. So I think there may be some place where we need to look at that as a project criteria of some of these projects based off of different funding streams from the federal government. In particular, we're going to need to read the tea leaves in the new administration really, really quickly. How competitive they would be in this new funding environment. And I want to temper that with the outright questioning of if this is going to remain a steady cash flow, because I don't want to get us oversubscribed with bonding repayments and then never again get to have money for competitive process, because every little trickle we get, we put in a bond repayment for the next X number of cycles. So I think it's both about managing to right size the program based off of future funding expectations, but also we need to be really clear about which of these projects in the new administration could get a match. And I think that we might have to read the tea leaves when new folks come in to FHWA, DOT, and our federal partners.
Very good. Good comments. Appreciate that. All right. Next up, Counselor Anderson, welcome.
Thank you. Grace, a really basic question that I might have missed. It's my first ROFA experience with C4. What is the difference between the candidate projects and the non-candidate projects? How do we go down from the larger list to just 9? I might have missed this in your earlier presentation. And I guess what's necessarily happening with the other 24 minus 9 projects that we have?
Oh, sure. It can be a little confusing in the sense that we actually have two allocation
Okay.
processes happening at once. The 24 candidates they're the candidates for our step 2 process, and this is typically our process to fund local projects in communities throughout the region. And that kind of process is just kicking off in the sense that we just received all the applications for that and now are moving into our evaluation. With the 9 candidate projects that we're discussing, these are actually projects that are in consideration for placing into a bond proposal package that then the region would take action upon and make a pretty significant decision as to whether or not we would look to bond regional flexible funds in efforts to pull money forward to be able to support whatever that package looks like of projects. And so it's a little bit of an interesting balance in that going on, because the decision around a bond package really affects, or it can have an effect on how our step 2 process plays out, as we currently have in progress as well, because essentially we're drawing from the same funding source. So that's why we're trying to bring forward a lot of, and that's also why this presentation is focused primarily on those 9 candidate projects and kind of all the information that we're looking to bring forward, as well as gathering your input as we're trying to bring some ideas together in efforts to then bring you more information about like what does that actual trade-off eventually potentially look like. Since right now it's a little harder for us to be able to say that under the current context.
Okay, very helpful. And then for the sake of the larger group, I would agree with Councillor Lewis. I think these projects, when they are eligible for matching funds, just augment our dollars so much more, and really prioritizing that in the criteria with an extra focus, I think helps us maximize our dollars.
Very good. Thank you for the comments. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, another way to maybe answer Councillor Anderson's question or respond to it, that is that I don't disagree with what Grace responded to Councillor Anderson, but I would say that from our perspective, that the step 2, the 24 projects are typically, the awards are much smaller And in step one, because the bonding are much larger, so in order to get, some projects that are, again, large in scale, you'd rely on the biggest opportunity there is, because step two won't fill that gap. Essentially, that's my response. Thank you.
Helpful context. Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate the input. Councillor Baumgartner, good morning.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation, Grace. This is not directed at you directly, but I would like to reiterate Commissioner Savis's comments about Clackamas County needing better support for transit, and also with respect to what I'm hearing is potential rumbling still of tolling and in the background. And the city of Westland, for instance, is trying to embark on some long-range planning, and we would like to add to our affordable housing, create better density in housing, but we need transit to go along with it. So I'll just put it there. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you all for the comments. We're getting close to putting a pin in this topic. I'll look for any last hands before we transition on. Grace, thank you very much for taking the hot seat this morning. We appreciate your time. Ted, good to see you as well. With that, we'll transition into our TPAC updates. Let's see, we've got Jeff Owen and Dana Webb on the hook this morning. Good morning.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you for having us here in your meeting. All happy to start off and share the mic with Dana as well. So Jeff Owen with Clackamas County as the Clackamas County TPAC rep. So in your large packet, I believe it's around page 61. We have just a few pages in your packet that highlight some of the work of TPAC in the last month or two, and a little bit of a look ahead. As you've just heard for quite a while and had good discussion on, much of our TPAC content in the last couple of months has also been the same topic you've just been discussing, the regional flexible fund allocation. And so that is also the bulk of the few pages that we have in your packet. So I'll try to just highlight a few things that are not specific to that topic. So as we do every month, we touch on fatal crash updates around the region. This is always a sobering way to start out our meeting, but reminds us of the importance of our work and transportation. And we did, within Clackamas County, have 5 fatalities that have occurred. There's a few links there to some of the work underway. There's also quite a lot of work within Clackamas County that is kicking off for increased kind of comprehensive look at traffic safety. There's a quick bullet there about the transit minute. There has been a little more of an uptick in transit ridership. And so that's great news, looking generally around closer to about 70% of pre-pandemic levels. So that is kind of inching up little by little, and that'll be touched on tomorrow morning at JPAC as well. One other item just a little further down is Metro is doing a lot of work now, pulling partners together for a comprehensive climate plan. And so they have been organizing some work around climate initiatives under a federal grant as part of the EPA's climate pollution reduction grant. So there is an open house that's kind of online available now. There's a link there. That's a fairly short survey to give some inputs from your perspectives, as well as anyone within your communities to kind of show preferences and opinions on all the various ways to kind of combat and tackle some of the pieces of the climate action plan. And then the next few pages do again talk about the RUFA topic. Just one piece I would humbly add that I think was mentioned a little bit in the last discussion item here in your meeting is several TPAC members have discussed in the recent months, almost like a metaphors and such of fruit, that it's not always an apples to apples comparison of kind of what's needed in the region and what the applications into this type of funding bucket are. That it's often kind of apples to oranges, apples to bananas, et cetera, as we think of breakfast foods and other nutrition. The transportation projects and needs around the region are not all the same, and that they do vary quite a bit by jurisdiction and by development. So that has been definitely a discussion point at TPAC for a few months now. So there's a bit there again that's RUFA related, and then two other quick points, and welcome Dana to add in if I've missed anything or have any questions. We did at TPAC receive a brief update on the expanded metropolitan planning area into North Marion County. So there's just a little bit of information there on PDF page 64 of your packet. And then finally, also received an update on Safe Streets for All. These are kind of federal funds that are coming into the region to help shine a light on safety again, and all the different ways that different portions of the region are working on safety. And again, quite a bit of work is occurring here within Clackamas County as well. If you'd like to dig into that more into the future, we've got a few experts that could offer that and give some updates on their work. So I'll pause there and see if I've missed anything, Dana, and happy to have discussion as well.
Nothing else to add. Jeff did a great job covering it.
Very good. Thank you both for the update. Any questions or comments for Jeff or Dana? Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I have a question. The comments, my concerns earlier expressing about on the technical committees, was that was indeed discussed from our, some of the members. I gather that you didn't all make traction on that, but am I understanding correctly that this was kind of a rigorous discussion about the criteria and about the step one and the different categories, and how they were evaluated was not necessarily reflective of those two themes of the high capacity opportunities, as well as making an addition in the step one for new projects or startups or things along the lines of trying to get project development. I mean, that was discussed at TPAC, correctly? Can you give me a sense if it was, and if so, if you feel as though that we were unsuccessful at the technical level as well?
I would agree. I think there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of questions asked for sure. So different TPAC members around the region from different jurisdictions, not only ours, have asked quite a bit of questions as to how the evaluations would occur against such a breadth, a wide range of likely applications, as you mentioned, kind of back in time a bit, all the way up until now. I do think that some of those pieces have been incorporated, and I do think the blue shading and such, for example, is a little tough, but it's also not everything is purely quantitative. I do agree that I think that mention of kind of the different types of fruit and such, the apples to apples, it's that talking points and discussions I think have definitely occurred, but I can't provide, I don't think, a solid answer as to exactly how they've been incorporated just yet. I think tomorrow's discussion, as you've already referenced at JPAC, will get into that some more. So that's not really a perfect answer to your question. I think it's a little bit probably of a blended response of I do think that the team at Metro has incorporated some of that, but I do think it appears to still be heavily leaning towards our more traditional understanding of kind of a CIG pathway. I do think it remains a little bit of a conundrum as to how best to provide project development for projects that still do need to get to that in the future that aren't quite ready for that yet. So not sure if Dana, if that's been your sense as well, and anyone else, if they're waiting in the wings. I believe that Karen Burig attended the last TPAC meeting and several others around with different jurisdictions. Not sure if Will's on the line, if others need to contribute to that, but sorry, that's a bit of a blended response for you.
Very good. Appreciate the insights. Actually, a question for you, Jeff or Dana. So, to kind of just dig into the quantitative ranking process a little bit deeper. So is that, you can use quantitative ranking to or to combine for to move something to a top or a bottom of a project list. So it can be exclusionary, where it's ruling something out, or it can be inclusionary, where you're bringing things to the top to kind of choose from them. I mean, is it still qualitative? I mean, once you create kind of that overarching ranking, is it still kind of a qualitative process where, you know, you're not necessarily just picking down the list ultimately? And the reason I ask that is because, you know, as with any quantitative ranking process, you know, for ease of math, if you've got 4 ranks and you've got a 5, 5, 1, 1, that's the same quantitative ranking as 3s across the board. And does consistency outweigh certain superior performance and really low performance in other metrics? So how does that kind of get factored in?
I think I'd have to, you know, really try to make sure and lean on the Metro team to kind of give a response specific to their kind of process. But I think a bit of what I heard that should be continuing now in time through tomorrow and forward is I think what I understand is a blend of not every piece being evaluated is purely quantitative. That there is some quality discussions and different ways to try to achieve the same types of RTP goals. So I think you're raising a really good point, and I just don't think I'm, you know, since I'm not the one doing the evaluation, I'd hate to try to stretch there a little bit, but I think your point carries really well into the discussions now.
Very good. No, I appreciate that. And I kind of wanted the Clackamas perspective too, but that's okay. All right, very good. Just looking around the room, Dana, do you want to give us a TPAC membership update?
Sure. Good morning, Dana Webb with the City of Oregon City. I'm here this morning representing the cities of Clackamas County for TPAC. So as you're all aware, in October, Jamie, who was our primary Cities of Clackamas County TPAC representative, accepted a new position. And so in that interim, Will and I have been kind of sharing that primary role. So today we'd like to propose to you the 2025 representatives for TPAC. And so Metro does ask that the C4 body issue a nomination and basically bless this listing. And so at this point, Will isn't able to join us today, but he has acknowledged that he is willing to take that primary role. And then in the alternate positions, we'll be adding some new team TPAC members. So I'll stay on as an alternate. We'll also have Laura Turway from the City of Happy Valley joining us, and Tanya Batty from Milwaukee. And so with that gives us a little more flexibility to cover these TPAC meetings and a little more broad input from multiple jurisdictions that we can share. So that is our proposed slate of representatives for Team TPAC for cities of Clackamas County.
Very good. Is that a C4 Metro subcommittee recommendation that gets moved up, or does that go to the who does that go to next? Who gets to make the decision?
I'm gonna lean a little bit to Jamie. I believe it does go to C4.
Yes, I can jump in. Thank you. Today, these names are coming to C4 Metro for any questions. If you would like to make a recommendation to the C4 main body, that recommendation can be bubbled up.
Very good. Mayor Milch, a comment.
Just a question. I think I know who Will Farley is. Joe Buck, is he the guy that was there at the little holiday gathering we had at Happy Rock Tavern the other night? Okay. Yeah. He's a good guy. Yeah, he'd be a great one. Thank you.
Very good. Well, having worked with a number of these individuals over the years, they are all quality individuals. So, you know, as co-chair of this group, I have no qualms with any of them and are very supportive of the recommendations being made. Anybody else have a thumbs up, thumbs down shrug for me? All right, I see a number of thumbs up. We're gonna call that, under Robert's Rules of Order, we'll call that the official thumbs up, and we'll go from there.
Thank you for your recommendation. This will be coming back before the C4 body in January.
Very good. Thank you very much for that information. All right, moving on to kind of the next list on our agenda, we get to have a Metro Solid Waste Facilities Plan update from Marta McGuire. I see Marta just got popped into our list. Good morning, welcome. Ta-da!
Good morning. Oh, good morning. Trying to get my technology to cooperate. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Marta McGuire. I'm Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department Director, and I'm here to give you an update on the Regional System Facilities Plan. We were last here with you in October when we had released the draft plan for public comment and had the opportunity to walk through the draft plan with you all and share the investment strategy. And so I wanted to give a brief update just today where we're at and what's next. And I just have 3 slides to share and quickly walk through. And so I think I can pull that up now. Just one moment. Or maybe not. Let's see. So it doesn't seem like my sharing function wants to cooperate. So I will just share this with you verbally, and then I'm happy to send the slides to you all so you can have them. I know you are on a tight schedule. As I mentioned, we were last here in October to share the draft plan and walk through the investment strategy. As a reminder, this plan is a 20-year vision and roadmap for investments into the infrastructure of the garbage and recycling system for facilities and services. It's essentially a blueprint that sets direction for where we want to make investments, and each project within the investment strategy will have a more detailed implementation plan that will be developed and budget will be allocated through our annual budgeting process. We have been working on the development of this plan over the last 2 years, and it's been developed through 5 different phases, with each phase of the plan building a chapter of the plan. We've engaged with local governments, industry, community, and tribal partners in the region as to develop this set of investments. And we've had many touch points, including this committee, as well as Metro's other formal advisory committees and the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, in addition to meeting with local government staff through different work groups and reuse organizations and industry. We issued the draft plan for public review on October 1st, and the public comment period closed in early November. We now have a public comment report summary that we can share the link out to that responds to all the comments that we received. We had a work session with Metro Council yesterday where we shared the public comment summary as well as the proposed revisions that we have made to the plan as a result of what we've heard. And that is also available for your review. In terms of what's next, we will be bringing the draft plan to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, which is similar to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, a formal advisory committee that advises Metro Council on the management of the garbage and recycling system. So they will have an opportunity to review the draft plan and provide feedback to Metro Council prior to adoption that is planned for March of this year. That's sort of a quick update, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Thank you for the information. All right, crew, questions, comments? Oh, looks like you might not be on the hot seat this morning, Martha. Very good. Well, thank you very much for the time. We appreciate the information.
Yeah, happy to be there. Thank you.
And pop those slides over and we'll take a look at them.
Thank you. I will get them over to Jamie. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other MPAC questions, comments, updates? We had a very robust, I was not at the last meeting, but I did watch the last meeting. Very robust conversation with Council President Peterson on housing, supplemental housing services, bonding, things like that. Montgomery Park Title IV update was passed. And I don't know, Mayor Buck, anything else to add on MPAC stuff? Very good. And I see that our MTAC update was included, December agenda was included as part of our packet. Ms. Lorenzini, anything else to add on that topic?
No, the November MTAC meeting was canceled, so there's not necessarily a need for an MTAC update this month. In lieu of a formal update, Team MTAC has provided the December agenda in the packet if you're interested in what we'll be discussing.
Very good. Thank you very much. We're actually ahead of schedule, and we didn't see our TriMet transportation safety person jump on, so I'm guessing we're going to keep that one postponed for a future presentation. So heck, we'll get you out of here early today. Any other comments, questions, thoughts for the good of the order? Commissioner Savas, I'm always looking for you for words of wisdom.
Yeah, I feel compelled to give you an update. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background and then roll into the update. You all perhaps know that there were several roundtables around the state that were hosted by the Joint Committee on Transportation. 3 of them were in the metro region, the first one in Portland, the second one in Happy Valley, and then the day after the third one in the metro region was held in Hillsborough. I attended all 3. The themes from the group were, with the exception of only one person in total, but the theme was a suggestion posed. The suggestion or the question posed by the co-chairs was, if if we were to fix this funding gap, what mechanism would you recommend? I would say hands down, without doubt, the road user charge was by far at all 3 was raised. So that was a significant issue. And for the most part, tolling was pretty well dismissed by a number of people, with the exception of one elected official. So that, again, that's a total of all 3 of the metro region discussions. Moving the clock forward, the co-chairs set up 3 work groups following those roundtables, and one was specifically about maintenance and how the topic of maintenance and how do we get towards maintaining what we have. The second work group was focused on transit, and the third work group the theme was finish what we started, or the HB 2017 projects. I was invited and sat on the work group number 3, the latter. And I've been briefed on what took place at the other as well, read the minutes and so forth. Those are all accessible. You can view those on ODOT's website, or not the ODOT's website, but the OLIS website. So you can watch those conversations. And in the latter part of each of those, the last meeting, which was actually, we thought these meetings would go until January, but they just came to a kind of a surprising abrupt end. And we thought there'd be more context and more robust opportunity once they made all their presentations. Nonetheless, I was a little bit disappointed that they were, and the co-chair did say, hey, well, if we need to have more conversation, we can do that. They're still on the calendar for January, but I don't see that happening. Nonetheless, we were also informed at the same meeting that they would send out a survey to the members about what they thought. So after reviewing the questions in the survey and also the themes that came across, as well as, not this Monday, but Monday last, the Oregon Business Plan Group held their annual conference. And I will tell you, in the last few weeks here, this issue about tolling is resurfaced in a pretty strong way. It's pretty prominent in the survey questions as well. Actually, I consider one of the questions a trap. It's like, I'll just read it to you so you have an idea what I mean by trap. If you had to choose, which priority would be important to you at this moment? Tolling the system where the primary goal is to raise revenue for the project area, or tolling the system where the priority goal is to manage congestion. And so it's one or the other, right? So I don't know what all these responses are, but my main point or focus here is to say that that's not the only question that has tolling listed. So I'm just informing you all that this is going to be a topic again, and I was somewhat disappointed that the examples of maybe where tolling could be successful and the examples of where tolling is not successful was a conversation I was hoping to have. We had a lot of learned experience about our particular corridor. And again, we talked about transit earlier. I appreciate Councilor Baumgartner mentioning again that you know, if you are trying to manage congestion and you're trying to also achieve safety and climate goals, and you don't have transit in the formula, pushing more people off the freeway on the local roads is a recipe for more CO2 added to the environment, and it's going to have an opposite effect. And we've had, and I've mentioned that we've had tolling's been in it, or not tolling, but diversion's been an issue for West Linn, Oregon City, and a lot of Clackamas County for over 20 years because of the bottleneck. So again, I want to alert you because I know this is a huge topic in the last 3 years. But there's momentum building on this topic. So I would encourage you all to speak to your state representatives, state senators, and so forth, and let them know that what you feel about this. I'll keep you informed as this goes forward. And lastly, the other update is that there has been some, I want to make you aware of this. We're trying to work this out, but there's been some friction and disagreement and with regard to how transit dollars are appropriated, and specifically the STIF transit dollars, which are a product of HB 2017, which the legislative intent is that we will essentially tax the employees on their payroll tax for the employees to give that first last mile connection to basically where people live, essentially, so that they can access transit, right? So I was elated when I heard this in 2017, but the long story short is that, and you heard me mention, is that we still have, and I do not see a pathway for a remedy for this, frankly. We still have 170,000 people in Clackamas County, nearly half the population, that don't have defined access, defined by a quarter mile with where they live, access to transit. And the way the state rules committees work, or the state rules committee define this, is they provided or assigned what's called a QA, or qualified entity. In this case, it's TriMet for the metro region. But our smaller providers that are filling a lot of important gaps, and kudos to all of you. Some of you were in this meeting and been in these meetings, and actually are members of C4 in our subcommittee. We're not getting the attention and commitments and the cooperation in this regard. So this might come up to the state legislature in this next session, because we understand that TriMet would like to ask for a greater percentage of the payroll tax, an increase. You know, we would support that if we could get a fair share at the table, but we are not getting a fair share. I guess that's the dispute. So we're trying to work on that, but I want to make sure you're aware of that. And we're trying to bring in more of a facilitated discussion to get a solution to this. So we go to the state legislatures and be able to speak with one voice. But those are the two hot issues I wanted to make sure you were all aware of. The number one, the tolling's coming back on the table, and an absence of a pathway towards providing more transit in Clackamas County in a meaningful way.
Very good. Mayor Milch, do you mind if I jump to John, Sarah for a response quickly, and then I will acknowledge you as well. John?
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Savas, I just wanted to very respectfully clarify that TriMet is not asking for an increased portion of the STIF. TriMet, as part of the OTA, the Oregon Transit Association, is requesting an increase to the overall STIF statewide. TriMet is not requesting a larger share of that. I want to clarify that point. Thank you.
So let me just clarify this. So it could be just a little bit of a nuance there, but essentially TriMet's supportive and will be lobbying for that as well, along with the OTA.
Yes, it is an OTA priority, and TriMet, is a major part of the OTA, and we'll be supporting that request.
Yeah, and I just so you all know, the other thing I'll just add to that is that the OTA, the Oregon Transit Association, members of that have reached out to me to try to see if we can't get resolution towards this, because they understand of this issue that I just shared with you, that they're cognizant of this. And I was recently appointed by the Association of Counties to represent them on the PTAC, which stands for, what does that stand for, John? I forgot.
Oof, I can't remember, Commissioner.
It's the Public Transit Advisory Committee for ODOT. So Public Transit Advisory Committee, PTAC. So I attended my first meeting a couple weeks ago. Members of that group have also reached out to me wanting to seek resolution because they understand this issue in Clackamas County. It seems like everyone is relatively around the state has got an equitable system in play. But there have heard for quite a long time this issue in Clackamas County. So we seem to be the focus right now on trying to get resolution towards this issue. Is that fair, John?
I think that's fair. And just to be clear, we've been working on trying to work this out with you all here for a while now. Better part of a year, I'd say at this point, trying to come to a conclusion that works best for everyone. And it is a challenge. And, we want to be supportive and make this work, without having to go to the state legislature. So we'll continue to work on that behalf.
Yeah, and John, I just want to just do a shout out to you personally, that you've been a great partner, and really appreciate working with you. I wish there were more of you.
Absolutely. Well, we're trying. Thanks, Commissioner.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Milch. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I have a very localized transit question that John Sarah can probably help me answer. I noticed over the last several months, Clackamas County has invested a lot in adding sidewalks to Southeast Jennings Avenue in the area between McLaughlin and Oatfield roads in the Jennings Lodge area of unincorporated Clackamas County. Do you know, John, if TriMet has any long-term plans to add some east-west transit service along there? I know you prefer to have routes that have sidewalks, and if this is going to make that possible.
Yeah, say the location again, Mayor Milch.
Southeast Jennings Avenue, which is just north of Gladstone in the Jennings Lodge community.
Yeah, definitely. Let me take a look at our maps and see what we have proposed for the future there. But my thought would be probably, or at least generally in that area, I know we have lots of ideas for additional east-west connections in that area. So let me see where those are, and I'll follow up with you personally.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I can add just one thing about that. That project was something that was awarded many years ago, and it's been we had a lot of problems kicking that off. It was that a flexible funds project, I believe. So it's like it's almost 10 years. So we're really excited that it's finally underway. I don't know if it's halfway completed, but it's a major corridor. It's a major safety issue. There have been some kids that have been killed over the years on that road because of lack of sidewalks. And there's school in that area, and the section is specifically between McLaughlin Boulevard and Oatfield Road. And the sidewalks will be dedicated to one side with some additional crosswalks to the school. So we're really excited about that project. So we just wish it would have been developed a long time ago, but we managed to get it underway.
Very good, John.
Mayor Milch, Jamie Lorenzini is doing my job for me. She pulled up the Forward Together Service 1.0 map and confirmed that there is proposed service on that Jennings Lodge area. So I'll send you a copy of that map, okay?
Very good. Of course, Jamie did. She's on top of that stuff. Any other comments for the good of the order? Well, with that, I thank all of you for your time and your commitment this past year. We were very successful in a lot of what we did. I appreciate all of your expertise and friendships. I hope that you all have a lovely holiday season. And with that, we will see you in the new year. Meeting's adjourned.